And Kevin has started recording.
All right, in order to respect everybody's time, how about we just jump into the most and probably the only critical question that we need to tackle today. So which survey we want to choose to start writing our own survey. Given the email chain between Kelly and Rowan, we still don't really know whether the A, what is A, sorry, could you remind me of the one that like
AAU?
yeah, the AAU one. For some reason it got listed as AAY on this meeting agenda. That we still don't know whether the AAU one has any like copyright problem for us to use. And
I just emailed, did you get my email, Rowan? I just emailed you, Rowan. I contacted AAU, they had a media contact or whatever, and I asked whether it was copyrighted, and they said there's no copyright that any university could share. Da-da-da. Oh, you said that. Oh, okay.
Yes. And I'm glad you got a response because I contacted like 3 different people and nobody got back to me. So
I just did that just
well
now.
done, Adea.
Well, it's a fluke because I just did it like 20 minutes ago.
You got the right person though. That's awesome.
But I started looking a little closer, and I want to discuss with you guys the 3 surveys we were looking at, and see what you guys, what I'm saying, guys, people think. Is that okay? Okay, I'm gonna kind of share my screen because I was looking over some things, and yeah, I'll just share it. Can I share? Yeah, I'm done. Oh, sorry, this is my power company. This is not what I wanted to share. I'm in the process of moving. That's not what I wanted to share. This is what I wanted to share. Nope, that's everything else. Okay. Everything that I don't want to say. Okay. Let's see. This was the statue. I'll give you an example. These are some things, the statue. The number of incidents, both reported and unreported, of sexual misconduct. And I think so the number and the type of incident. So the frequency and the type of incident. So I would just started looking at some of the surveys for comparisons. And why is this thing in the way? Let's see if I can make this smaller. Okay. So I started looking at some things for comparison. So the AAU, this is their section of interpersonal kind of sexual misconduct. And they asked the person about yes, no, whether they had sexual penetration or oral sex. And yes, no, let's see, whether the person did it by force. So they gave the context, whether the person did it by force and what they did to you. The context, whether it's a successful attempt, then what they did to you, and so forth and on. It was several questions, including kissing, touching, things like that, and threatening and all that. So that was a big, long section. Then I looked at the ARC version, and they kind of flipped what they did to you, flipped the context. So no, I think it's still, they bundled you parts, and then they added the frequency and kind of the context here. So what they did to you and the context with the frequency. But I actually like the CCSVS because they kind of ask you one question of all the things that they could do to you, like whether the person, forcible touching, oral, anal, whatever. So they ask you all those questions about whether you experienced that. The person said yes or no or unsure. And if they said yes or no or unsure, then depending on what they said, they then ask them the context questions. And it just covered everything in 2 questions instead of 5 or 6 questions.
Adea, thank you. I think that's really helpful. Folks, the surveys, of course, are on Basecamp, and there's also a document that has some summaries on that stuff. I have a couple of notes that I just wanted to kind of share as you're considering this, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. All
Let me
right.
stop sharing.
Yeah, these are much more general notes. Basically, one of the things that a lot of the recommendations have been, or a lot of the, so there's a body of research that evaluates how the surveys are perceived by the people who are taking them, and whether those, how people feel about it. Are they responding to the survey? Generally speaking, beginning and ending your survey with less emotionally weighted questions is going to be preferred. So, for example, the AAU survey starts off by asking some demographic information, and that gives you an opportunity to, is the person over 18? If they're not, and we haven't talked about whether people under 18 are going to take the survey or not, but
yeah.
And then ending with more general questions about perceived campus safety and community attitudes, for example, gives you a chance to de-escalate things. Something else that you need to consider is how much descriptive information about each incident do you really need to be able to understand the scope of the problem? And I think asking the minimum number of questions possible to meet the legal statute and avoid asking for detailed descriptions of the misconduct are really helpful. It doesn't really increase our understanding of the prevalence or our ability to prevent sexual misconduct to know how many times an act of violence happened to the same person, whether does it really improve our understanding if we know whether it was vaginal, anal, oral, or all 3, right? I think if we can keep our, when we're thinking about using trauma-informed language, when we're thinking about what's going to be usable and functional, we can ask a whole bunch of really invasive questions if there's a reason for it. But if there's not, I think backing off of that that level of detail might be really helpful. And then rather than creating additional, and for example, is it ARC 3 asks questions about perpetration. So it's not required within the statute that we ask questions about perpetration, but maybe you want to make those available to the schools as, these are some questions that you might want to ask, or maybe you want to let the schools know if you want to ask questions about perpetration, then, send us the questions and we will review them to make sure that they're using trauma-informed language, et cetera, et cetera.
I agree with you. I was just saying, I noticed that it was always a question of what was done to you, whether somebody poked you here, touched you there, and then the context later. And then because the context always changes, it was like 5 or 6 of those questions. And I kind of like the way it narrowed it down to 2, but I obviously didn't like the language. I don't know what survey I looked at. Maybe it was something you showed me, but they phrased it so eloquently that has someone like made you feel uncomfortable, or it was just so eloquent that I thought it got to everything that they said without giving explicit things. Didn't have to go into explicit things, but I would probably rely on you. But I just thought maybe taking what CC, that one, and how they kind of narrowly kind of tailored things, and then changing some of the words so that we feel comfortable with the words. That's what I was thinking. And there's no perfect survey. Even though we could get the bulk of the things one way, we could also switch out and change and go to different surveys if another survey did it better. I'll let Kelly speak. Let me mute myself.
Thanks, Adair. So I find myself wondering what I missed in the first meeting or two that I wasn't on this committee, and specifically, I'm wondering, did this group decide how it was going to construct this? It feels like we have. So, like, in other words, we have these three examples, and we're asking ourselves the question, which one are we going to start with? When I perceive that the question Rowan asked a few minutes ago is actually, or wasn't really a question, it was just sort of a series of observations that I think make the most sense to me right now, which would be, how do we meet the minimum standard of this statute? And I don't say that because I'm opposed to it. I say it because, for all of the reasons that Rowan listed, like plus the fact that people are not going to want to take a really long survey. Should we, instead of deciding which of these to start with, should we be going through the list of elements that we have to address, and then look for each of the examples of those things across the surveys and decide which of those actually looks good or makes sense to us or gives us the best example? I don't know if I'm making sense here, but I see sort of two different approaches. One would be to start with a whole survey and then try to cut pieces out of it. The other would be, do we agree on what the minimum set of objectives are, and let's just pull only those things in, and that way we might be actually pulling from different places depending on the language. Has that kind of a strategy been determined yet?
Yes, we actually did try that strategy before. I think
Okay.
Bell looked at some of the surveys and saw where it looked.
Okay.
There was, let me share my screen again. Am I sharing my screen? Oh, there it is. Here, where is it? Here's all the things that had to be in the survey.
Right.
And I actually put it, where's my Word document? Did I don't even know where the stuff I did. I had a Word document where I grouped those things together based on the ecological model, whereas personal level victimization. I can't find it now. I'm so sorry. I pretty much looked at everything that was required and I grouped it together. And I think Bell, I'm sorry, you're saying my personal stuff. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I think Bell went in and looked at some other things about the survey as well, but we did exactly what you said do. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, didn't you, Rowan, didn't you like compare some of the things across surveys, some of the questions across surveys, and something like that? So we did go through that, and we were going to divide up in subcommittees based on the grouping of questions, how the questions were grouped together. And some work on personal level victimization questions, some work on institutional relation questions and things like that. And but unfortunately, not that many people showed up for the last meeting. So we end up saying, because we had more than 3 surveys to look through, I think we had maybe 5 or 6. I forgot how many. Let's see. Something. But anyway, we had several and we just narrowed it down to 3 for our last committee. And we were going to just, first for this meeting, we were going to just look at those 3 and decide which survey mainly to follow. We didn't say anything about the language, but mainly to follow, and then give an argument about why. And I was just starting it off based on the last meeting. So yes, you missed that. So I started off based on the last meeting saying, okay, I would like this survey, and this was the reason why.
Okay. Thank you. I out of respect for process, don't let I'm not going to ask that we redo that then. Let's keep going. Thank you.
But we're still going to have to do what you just said.
Right.
Yeah.
But some work has already been done. I don't need to ask for any of that to be done again. Thank you for the.
Yeah.
I'm happy to proceed from here. Thanks.
there's no one survey that addresses all of the topics that are required by statute. One of the things, looking at the reviewed validated surveys, many of them don't ask, for example, about the impacts of the behaviors on the person's academic career or something like that. So, but I think and I know that some of the other states have chosen the ARC3 as their starting point and then have added or changed the language. And so looking at the other states' surveys, which are also on Basecamp in that same folder, could be maybe a next step. So, but I don't know if everyone has had an opportunity to kind of talk about how they would want to decide, like what kind. I mean, I've talked a lot about some of the points I would make, but I'm wondering, like Tiffany, Belle, and Lindsay, and Ethan, what are some of the things that you would want to consider when we're choosing a base survey to work from?
I think I totally agree with Idea's idea that because CCSVS, it has like a better flow of the survey, which is like when a person doesn't have to be presented with all the like lengthy question with explicit language. Like when we can ask primary questions and then filter somebody out to let them move into like the next part of the survey, and then the people who actually have that experience can be asked the question. I think that survey has good efficiency. And also the ACR3 one asks a lot of questions about perpetration, which is not required by the Oregon law. So I personally prefer to not start with that one because I think that one has a little bit too much information inside of it that's not required. I also agree with Kelly's idea that let's try not to make the whole thing too long because people just don't like taking long surveys. And the longer it has, I think the lower possibility that we can get high quality and complete answers from people. I personally prefer to start with CCSVS, even though it doesn't include some of the questions that we need to include, like the health impact and the financial impact of it. But we can always, but the thing is that other surveys also don't really include that. And that's the questions that we probably have to come up with, where we probably need to use some other survey that's not like really about sexual misconduct and then borrow their questions in order to like make sure that we complete all the requirements of the law. I personally think starting with CCSVS is a good idea. It's just my personal opinion after kind of reading through and skimming through all the surveys. I think that one is the most concise one that has good efficiency.
Yep, I agree. I like the branching. It's very concise. The only thing is just changing the verbiage, right? Like what Rowan was saying, doesn't need to be so descriptive, but I agree with everyone so far. And the CCSV be the one that we start with after looking at the other two I have on my iPad right here. I think that's going to get us in the general ballpark of where we want to be.
Sorry, it's a little loud where I am, but I agree as well on CCSVS. After looking at ARC3 as well, it is very descriptive, and I feel like the original one that most of us have agreed on is covers everything without being too detailed, which I don't think it would need to be as in depth as ARC3 stated on a lot of the things.
Yeah, not to be redundant, but I would echo that the CCSVS, I think the flow really is beneficial for efficiency and like Belle said, trying to get those complete answers and not making things too long or too in depth and descriptive like ARC3. So I think it's a really great place for us to start and build how we need to meet Oregon standards and what we think is important.
Quick question. Belle, would you mind sharing the spreadsheet? I know you put the folder, but I'm wondering, you did such a good job talking about how you created it at our last meeting. Could you share that with everyone? It would be helpful for me to remember because I just opened it up. And then I'm also thinking about getting to hear from everyone. I'm hearing so far there's a lot of support of the CV. I'm not going to say I don't have it in front of my brain, and I've been really it's been a couple of weeks lately, so I'm not even going to bother. But I would love that might be a good chance for us to do a little bit of comparison too of where some of the gaps might be.
Yeah, because you can see some of the comparisons we've already made, and so that could show Kelly what we had done before.
Awesome.
I just shared the link of the.
Can you share can you share it through the screen and walk us through it?
Yeah. I can try to share my screen.
Just as an aside, while Belle's getting us set up for sharing, the CCSVS is also the company that developed that Research Triangle Institute is also developing the federal title or the federal VAWA climate survey that's going to be offered in a few years. So it would already have us kind of, I'm sure it'll be somewhat parallel to the CCSVS.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, it's really small though. Can you make
It's
it?
really
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's
Oh.
that's a little better. Can you see?
Is it still small? Or I can try to expand it.
It's up. Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
Good
So
right there.
basically, this is what I did last time. So these like 5 groups of questions are what IDEA proposed that we can like split the whole group into. But given that we no longer stick with the idea of having like working group, I think it's just like a, you know, like an indication, like just a way that we categorize the items in those surveys. So the main kind of item is sexual assault experience, and then university experience about reporting, and then the impact of the sexual assault experience, and the general attitude, knowledge, perception, confidence regarding to like sex education, sex assault, and sex misconduct, and then demographic information. So I did a little like a project of just calculating how many items each survey included. I didn't really got a chance to do the AAU one and the ARC3 one, but I got a chance to do CCSVS and some like other ones. So basically, I think the CCSVS one, you can see like the number here. When it's 0, it literally just means that survey didn't really include any question related to that. And you can see like I have a detailed type of question here. So for the sexual assault experience, it has number type, when, where, who. And like you can see CCSVS basically has like, but like questions for most of the things, but it also has things that like it doesn't really like include like the support thing. The support from school, CCSVS didn't really ask. And CCSVS also didn't really ask like whether this person like decide to take a leave after the incident happened, and what is the financial impact of it, what is the health impact of it. But other than these 3 things, CCSVS basically asked everything that we need. And those are all the like things that the Oregon law requires us to include for the survey. So I think this template or this way of like doing this little descriptive statistic can be helpful for us to compare CCSVS, AAU, and ARC3 if that's what people want me to do or like want to do. But I personally think after reading after reading like these 3 surveys, I personally prefer the CCSVS, given that I've already know that include basically almost everything that we need except the support part, the health part, and the financial part.
Belle, thank you so much for going over that again.
And hold on, if I could get to, did I get to the, Why am I sharing my screen? I thought I found it. Oh, here it is. I downloaded it and here it is right here. It's behind me. Okay, so what I end up doing, I looked up I looked at the statute and I divided, this is when I assumed that we were going to divide into groups, and all the things that was supposed to be required by the statute, I put it into certain areas. Like this is interpersonal relationships or interpersonal experience with sexual assault. So they wanted to know the number of incidents and the type of incidents both reported, whether incidents where sexual misconduct occurred on campus, like location, personal contact, who perpetrated it. So these were kind of all interpersonal. These questions kind of dealt with structural type of things, whether you reported it, what was the school response, and things like that. Personal impact to your health, financial impact, whether you left the school, or things like that. So those were the kinds, and then your attitudes, perceptions on campus safety, confidence in institutional abilities. These are kind of your personal knowledge, perceptions, confidence that I put all together. And I was trying to see what surveys, we were trying to compare what surveys had the most of those things. And I think I covered all the things that supposedly in the statute, supposed to be in the statute.
Kelly, I know you've developed, you developed a survey, and I believe you all used the HEADS basic survey. Is that correct?
I have developed surveys as a professor, as a teacher, and things like that. When we did campus climate in my role right now as the associate provost, yes, we used HEADS. I'm a huge fan of the HEADS organization. It's run by outstanding people, does great work. I am not a fan of the survey. I don't, off the record, although I think this is recorded. We had a lot of problems with bad language. I mean, not bad language as in offensive or something like that, but bad language in the questions, meaning they were double-barreled or they could be misunderstood or understood in a variety of ways and therefore didn't yield. So anyway, I'm a big fan. I'm not sure where you were going with that question, Ron, but I would throw on top of this that while we've been discussing this and the different people have been expressing their preference for the CCVS, or I think I've dropped a letter there. I looked it up to see, I was a little worried about whether or not that 2016 date on it means that there's 8 years of either use or not use since then. But in fact, that maybe you all know this already, but I've learned this, that 2016 is the end date of a very extensive validation that they did of that survey. There's 100 and something page report of that, all the ways that they look to validate it too. So I, for lack of a better reason than simply there's already a majority, or sounds like a majority of the people here today want to start there, like that's pretty compelling evidence to me that suggests that it's a good starting point as well, that it's gone through a whole bunch of rigorous sort of steps and processes with each of the questions to figure out whether or not, they work, and are they good questions? Have they been narrowed down appropriately? Things like that. Rowan, why did you ask about HEADS? I may have just opined sort of freely there. I'm not sure what you wanted to know about it.
I was asking it as a leading question to get you to do what you just did, which was kind of talk about what your experience was, and also kind of get your feedback, because I know you're one of the few people here who have done this process, you and Adea, and I think I'm not sure. Caroline, have you guys done one over at PCC? Okay, yeah, so I was just curious as to what you thought about using the CCSVS as a starting point. Yeah, there's a lot of research.
All three of them really look quite. I mean, you run through a series of questions, right? Who made it? How's it been used? Does it look like it's been vetted, and have they done validity and reliability testing on it? A whole bunch of different academic exercises, and I'm sure all three of them have. And again, I just learned this one has done so on kind of a high level of intensity, which is a little surprising, frankly. So I think that we are all going to unpack, no matter where we start, we're all going to spend a bunch of time unpacking how each one aligns with what we think we're trying to accomplish. So I think just not being too worried about which one we pick, going with the one we feel most comfortable with is probably the best way to go, because they're all going to be helpful, and we're going to probably make a bunch of alterations and changes anyway. So see it as an exercise in which one's going to help us think about it. I think we should go with the one that people have already expressed the strongest affinity for, unless somebody has a compelling reason to not use it compared to the others. But it looks good to me.
Yeah. And just to point out, as I'm sure everybody here is aware of, once we start altering the wording, we will lose that reliability and validity, right? But
Yeah.
we'll at least be starting with a really high quality base. So.
And as long as we avoid things like accidentally adding a second component into a question, right? Making it a double question or something like that. You're absolutely right. As soon as you change it, you lose some of that. But I think we can count on it having been dialed down to a level that while we may want to make some adjustments to specific languages and stuff, it's probably going to hold up fairly well.
Question. Every time I've changed a survey, I used the original and added another question or whatever. When I had to get Cronbach Alpha, is there a minimum number of subjects that you have to have in order to get a Cronbach Alpha?
You're asking me specifically?
I guess whoever knows.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want. What are you calculating with that Cronbach Alpha? I mean,
Internal reliability. Internal reliability. Because if we're going to change, we want to see how the test is functioning, right? So I was just testing, because if we're going to have like a number of students who are going to test out or kind of test out our question or questionnaire, maybe we can see how many we could get. I don't know.
I think there will be plenty. I mean, depends on the size of the school, obviously, but I think the school, you take Willamette sort of as the example, we're around, what are we, around 3,100, 3,200 students total, graduate students, everybody. I mean, that will, even a low response rate ought to yield plenty for those purposes, I would think. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, never mind. I will say this. I was just talking about the sexual assault experience component of it. The other components, who knows what survey would be better for, to be honest with you. I liked it for that reason. For the other components, we still have to kind of look and decide which is better. We may want to stay. What, you're going to say something, Rowan?
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing you could do is take a look and see if the wording could be altered to describe different kinds of experiences, but within that same kind of general question structure. Because you're right, the CCSVS is very specific to sexual assault experiences. But in general terms, so it sounds like what people like about the CCSVS is there's a huge body of research behind it. The way that it's structured with the kind of moving through the different topics is pretty, people like that. They feel like that works. So you're starting off with demographic characteristics, ending up with asking questions that are more general about, personal experiences on camp, or not personal experiences, but attitudes and behavior, such. So is there anyone who would like to make an argument for one of the other surveys? Because I'm wondering if we can come to a decision point.
Can we have two surveys, one as the primary and one as the secondary?
Yeah, I think that it's just in the agenda. It said that deciding which survey instrument to base the survey on, and then there were just the three options. So, if you choose one of those, and then you can, add in for sure, right? Like some of the states have questions that are probably more relevant to some of the things that are in our statute as well. would you like to, I'm sorry, I'm not the chair.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I guess the chair needs to ask if you know, about I don't know, you need a vote necessarily. Like, I don't think, Kevin,
Okay.
it doesn't have to
What-
be like voice vote, right? It could just be a consensus.
Okay. Would we like to vote on the survey we want to use as the basis for designing our survey? Okay, how many vote for, oh my goodness, I need to get the names of them. The CCSV, I guess it's the CCSV.
CCSVS, yeah.
Okay, CCSVS. Oh. I think Bell, so it's kind of everybody. Then, okay, then it's the CCSVS. It's concluded. That's what we're going to use as the primary driver of survey. Maybe in the next meeting, we can look at how the language was phrased and framed for those questions and look at what we're required to ask and see how we could use that same format to make sure that we meet the statute, and maybe just divide it up by sections, how we have the sections, and work on each section as a committee. Does everybody agree with that or want to comment about that? And how I'll be quiet and let you guys take the floor.
Adea, can you say what you just said again? I'm thinking two different things based on what your suggestion. So I just want to make sure that I'm preparing myself for the next meeting.
Oh, okay. My suggestion was since we're going to go with the CCSVS, is we've divided the survey up based on the statutes, based on the type of questions that were kind of hung together, what type of question, whether it was interpersonal violence related questions, whether it was impact questions, whether it was institutional, with your relationship with the institution after you reported and your experience, and demographics, things we wanted to ask on demographics. So we divided it up, and also your attitudes as well. So we divided it up into sections. And I said the first thing I saw that really sold me on the CCSVS was the interpersonal sexual relationship experience, things that you've had there. So I was saying we could look at those required questions that we have to ask, that we have to ask students, and those where that maps on to that survey, that's similar to that survey. And then making sure we create the questions similar to the CCSVS, but also make sure we answer all the statutes. That's what I was saying. Probably
Thank you.
convoluted way of saying it.
No. I just need that little extra detail, so I appreciate it. Our thoughts, and so I will frame the reason I'm asking some of these questions is I realize in trying to prepare myself for this meeting, trying to sort through all of the surveys, and then also because they are in different orders, I just found it hard to track, so that I felt like I could come to this meeting to be really thoughtful about, like, well, this one had this one had that. So I'm thinking partly about strategy for the next meeting. So one of the clarifying questions I wanted to add on then, Adea, is, are we thinking that we want to, what I thought I heard you say was at the next meeting, we could then together go through. And I just know that's going to take a very long time, although I love it. It's just going to take a very long time. So were you recommending that? And if not, is there some other ways that you all would recommend, or can we talk through strategy to set us all up for success? Either by looking at a smaller number, so it's less confusing, each one of us taking a smaller section, or any other suggestions?
One of the,
Okay,
sorry,
go ahead.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Rowan.
one of the concerns I think about dividing it into the different groups was that there's not that many people on this committee, right? So if you're talking about 4 or 5 different groups, you're talking about 1 or 2 people per committee. And so maybe if you want to move through it by section, so, thinking about that, personal experience section and defining, okay, these are the, I sort of have it broken down too, but that from the statute, it would be sections A, B, C, D, right? So the first questions you're going to look at the next meeting would be questions relating to topics A, B, C, and D from the statute, right? And then maybe people could come with ready to discuss that. And that way, I don't know, Adea, what you think about that, because I think we all really love that socio-ecological framing, but but maybe group mind might work better than trying to have people meet in separate meetings outside of this one.
Yeah, I think we had agreed on that on our next meeting, that we were gonna, instead of having groups, maybe those actual groups, that'll be what we'll work on, those questions like the sexual experience. Instead of that being group A, everybody's gonna work on those questions that group A was gonna work on. So that based on those statutes. So I guess we would compare the questions, the comparative question on the CCSV, and maybe kind of reframe it if we could work on it on our own and reframe it on how you would, using the same style, how would you reframe and capture those questions using the CCSV format, maybe like that.
Do we want to, are we going to want to be prepared to do the whole thing, or as Rowan suggested, like pick out a section per meeting or 2 sections per meeting? Rowan, did I understand that correctly?
Well, yeah, the
the
sexual experience is just one section, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
And that's the biggest one.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that A through D, those first, and I'm sorry, I'm referring specifically to topics within the statute. So
Okay.
I had shared that list of the topics required by the survey, and that's what I'm referring to, the A, B, C, and D. That might be a place to start because that would give you the opportunity. One of the things you need to think about, remember, is using that definition of sexual misconduct that's at the beginning of the statute. And making sure that you're talking about sexual, experiences of sexual harassment, experiences of domestic or dating violence, experiences of stalking. You need to come up with a definition for sexual exploitation because that's not defined by statute. And that one's really broad, right? It could include exhibitionism, voyeurism, non-consensual pornography, having your images taken and distributed without your consent, that sort of thing, right? So, but I think that might be a place to start.
So we have to determine definition. That would be, yeah, that's more. Yeah. Okay.
And I think maybe meeting with the language subcommittee too might be really helpful for that, because that's one of the things I think that they're concerned about as well, using trauma-informed language in that way. So you might want to invite them to your next meeting, or ask if you can attend their next meeting, however you want to do it.
Maybe they can come to our meeting. Do you want us to, because when I was thinking of trauma-informed language, I was thinking of like how you introduce the questions, and obviously not, and give them the option not to answer and things like that, and warn them about the question. But within the question themselves, should there be trauma-informed language within the question itself as well? Okay,
Yeah,
Carolyn
I think,
says yes.
Structure, the structure of the survey, as well as the language used in each individual question, should be trauma-informed. Yeah.
Kelly, I would like your feedback on what your approach would be from where we are now. We have a timeline. That's why we're meeting every other week. We have a timeline of January because that's going to be handed off to the other committees, I think, to go to the universities or something like that. I forgot what the other committees have to do, but we have a timeline to get them the full survey. So,
well, so am I correct in my understanding that the public meeting laws that we're subject to means that some of us can't meet off the clock to work on it, right? But I mean, because that would be my inclination. That's the way to get
Yeah, that's the way to get stuff done.
Right? I mean, so, but am I also correct in believing that individually we can work as much on it as we want? We just then have to sort of bring that in, share it, and see whether people think it's useful or not, right? I think that picking, this is going to sort of kind of go against something, not against it, but kind of reverse my thinking of earlier in this hour. I think that having a really clear starting point in the survey ought to help us move faster through some of these questions than we might think. So to Rowan's example of a moment ago, you know, how we define the breadth of a particular sort of general category that we've been given, we can probably use the long list of questions of particular, you know, types of encounter and say, do we want to be this specific and therefore we're going from A to Z, or do we want to roll all these together into something more general and we can make a decision about that? I don't know if that's too cryptic, but I'm just thinking that this, Rowan, to your point, this survey has a long list of different types of encounter in it, right? And so we can use that as a prompt in our thinking and in our discussions to help us make some decisions that way. Beyond that, if we can, to something Caroline and others I think mentioned, if we can do it sort of modularly, 1 or 2 per week, and just know what we're working on, then each of us can do as much as we can to inform our own thinking in between meetings, then we can maybe move a little faster. So it makes sense to me. I think it's a very challenging way to work. And you have people like me talking for 90 seconds when they could talk for 20 and such things. So yeah, makes sense to me to proceed that way.
Kelly, to your point, I think, you know, one of the things you can do is you can be really specific, right? You can, in your question, you can say, these next questions, we are going to be asking you about sexual contact that you may have experienced that was done without your consent. Just to be clear, by sexual contact, we mean bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And without consent means, you know, incapacitated, you know, felt like you had to, you didn't have a choice, blah, blah, blah. And so you can do that, and you can just make that sexual contact stand. You don't want to use the term sexual assault necessarily within the survey, right? Because people are like, oh, well, it wasn't rape, you know, it wasn't that, it was just I didn't want to do that thing, right?
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to use the descriptor. You can choose to say, you know, did you consider that sexual assault, if you think that's an interesting question. It's not required by the statute, but does that make sense to folks?
Yeah.
So you're asking,
like
you're
the
giving them,
discrimination.
this is what we mean by, sexual harassment, right? And has something that made you feel like that happened to you since you've been here, rather than giving them 20 examples of how somebody might be sexually harassed. And if their experience falls outside that, then it doesn't really count, kind of, right? But maybe if folks could take a look at the, you know, I think the first thing you need to do is define your terms, right? What definitions are you going to use for your terms? And then you can write the questions to ask about the behaviors that fall within those definitions.
I think agreed on that point. I would also, I think, Adea, if it were possible, I don't know if we could do this right now before we're done, but like if we could break this list, I'm looking at the list that's in Basecamp of all the different elements that survey has to cover. If we could like break that up, if there's some way to logically break it up and say, okay, next meeting we're working on A through D, and then the meeting after that we're working on M, N, O, P, Q, and R, sort of thinking about it that way, then we can all sort of concentrate. I mean, I think what I will do is sort of print off a copy of the survey and just sort of read through it and mark it up in the way that Belle, sort of like her spreadsheet, right? Like this is dealing with X and this is dealing with Y, and this is dealing. Then we could sort of target our efforts more easily in a meeting, a 1-hour meeting.
Okay.
Kevin, can I just this is an order question. Folks can't meet, like I can't meet with Adea and Kelly and we can't write questions outside of a public meeting, but Adea could start a document in Basecamp and then Kelly and I could comment on it, right? As long as the document was public. And then that document would become part of the meeting materials for the next meeting. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is accurate. Yeah, so you do markups on each other's documents within Basecamp. That's fine. I mean, public meeting law is kind of weird about this. As long as it's kind of asynchronous and you're not like meeting at the same time, because that would count as a meeting. But how you describe it would be perfect.
Okay. So that's why it's really important to use Basecamp, because that way everybody's got access. There's there should only be one copy of a working document at any time. So if you're editing it, then you upload your most recent version, and then it's also tracked within Basecamp. So
I think I like that plan. That's so we could be working and seeing what each other's working on. What were those definitions again that we need to go ahead and that we need to define? That's outside the statute.
Well, it's within, so the statute defines, and I'm sorry, I don't have I don't have it pulled up right now, but it defines sexual misconduct. I will try and grab that for you real quick.
Okay.
And then that definition of sexual misconduct has a bunch of different components. Some of them I think are going to be pretty easy for you, but that sexual exploitation, we always get stuck on that one because it's such a catch-all, right? Like there's so many things. And I know, I'm sure those folks who are on campuses, you've seen non-consensual sharing of images, and you've seen people being coerced into sexual activities because the person said, if you don't, then I'm going to share these images, right? So all of that kind of stuff. Or trying to get access to someone's, walking into the bathroom while someone's using it, right? All of that kind of stuff kind of falls in that bucket of sexual exploitation.
Oh, okay.
I know, it's a lot, right?
My mind is okay.
And you can break that out further if you want. You can say by sexual exploitation, we mean these things. And we're going to ask you questions about this list of things that all fall under sexual exploitation, right? You can choose how you're going to do that. That's the definition. I just put the definition in the chat that's from the statute.
When we save the meeting, will the definition, well, I can just copy paste.
Yeah, and you also want to think about what do you mean by violence, right? How are you defining harassment? That's
so, okay. I'll work on that as well, and I'll probably need everybody's help.
Yeah, Dana, you don't have to take that all on by yourself.
right.
Yes.
In my to-dos for this week, I included like starting to research different definitions. So if folks
great.
have the capacity to do that, like I don't know if we all need like 15 different, but for folks who have the capacity to do some quick searches, especially if you find something you really like, then we can do kind of a comparison at our next meeting. So that might be a nice way that we at least get a couple different definitions to start off of. If we have a minimum of 3, that would be fantastic. If we have all of us, that's great too. And then I just did want to confirm if we wanted to break down like ABC, like did we want to break down the section, like did we want to start with the sexual violations that was in the CC CSV? I want to say crime victims compensation, whatever. So are we going to go ahead and start with the sexual violence part to get us started, or did we think we were going to do a different one? Where's that time? Almost out of time. So I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with what section we wanted to review before the next meeting.
I think that one would be good. That's my choice. I mean, my opinion, just one person.
Do you want to have you'll need definitions for those terms though before you start to write those questions?
Yes.
So maybe what you could do is decide on definitions at the next committee meeting. Okay. And you could also choose something that would be fairly simple, like demographics, right? So that way you'd have the definitions, you could agree on those at the next meeting, and then you could work on those questions afterwards, because I think those are going to be more challenging. You can't really write them until you've defined your terms. The demographics, I think you can knock those out pretty easily because it's a fairly, that one's just a little bit easier to do. The tricky part with demographics, and this is where students, you're really, really important, is terms change so much, right? So when you're asking someone about their gender identity, what terms do you want to use? And it's more important that you all have the definition on those terms because I'm assuming have a better idea of how other students are referring to those terms.
And you still think that should be at the front at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the demographic section of the statute is just J. So, and it says demographic information that could be used to identify at-risk groups, including but not limited to sex, race, ethnicity, national origin, economic status. So that's where you're going to be starting, is with that section J.
Okay. Section J. Okay. I think that's good. That's the way to at least move forward while we're, yeah.
Do you all want to vote on that real quick, or?
Oh. Do we agree with what Rowan said about how we should conduct our next meeting? We should have a rolling document in base camp over possible definitions and put the definitions or kind of critique the definitions, and also look at section J for demographics and see what questions we should have for demographic. Okay, everybody.
Yeah. Quick question. I can imagine downloading and then accidentally leaving a document and then working on it over a couple days and then uploading, and now it's no longer the same document. So any strategies to avoid that? Or I just want to name that it's possible. So we really want to make sure we upload the same day, right? So we don't, I'm used to Google Docs and that's not what we're working off of. So any other suggestions to ensure that we don't accidentally delete a more or remove or replace a more updated version?
I think you're going to have to just upload it as soon as you're done. I'm so sorry. Or check. You can check to see when the last version was uploaded. So if you do accidentally keep it open and you notice, you can check to see if someone else in the activities section, it'll tell you. But yeah, we can't use Google Docs because it's, yeah, okay, sorry. I wish we could, right? Oh, it's so much easier.
Totally understand. I just need to use my brain differently is all, and that's fine.
I don't know if this would work out. Thought on the run here. Like if, let's say we're working on some common paragraph, Caroline, like if what we did was each pick our own color and then paste it back in without erasing the previous one, but putting your own new one in and said, make very clear this is with an annotation, says something like my thoughts on word choice for this. And then we could at least, I mean, that will balloon whatever we're working on, but we could try that. I mean,
I really appreciate that, Kelly, a lot.
I like that too.
I feel like you lost something.
Yeah.
You could also, I think you can also use the editing function in Word, right? And so your edits become suggestions. So
My fear there is as much as I dislike it, I too have become totally acclimated to Google Docs. And so if two of us were doing that separately and we each uploaded a document back up, now we would have two of them with those things in each place. Although we could, again, copy paste and keep track of each person's suggestion. I think we're gonna have to just try it and see how it goes. Quick question, Rowan or Kevin, is there a complete document, a full statute in Basecamp somewhere? I've been looking for it and haven't found it. It must be there somewhere though, right?
Yes, it's in the resources.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
I forgot the name of it. I used to know it by heart. Let's see.
I'll look for it. If it's there, I'll find it. And if not, I'll look it up online or something. Thank you.
And Adea, this is not meant to put you on the spot. I heard you say that you would maybe you would be starting that definitions document. Do you have
Yeah, I could do that.
Okay.
I could do that.
Thank you.
can you, I'll try to work on that tomorrow.
Just so we don't have multiple people doing it, same thing. So thank you so much for getting it started for us.
Okay. I will do that. Let's see. I'm trying to find the document. I think it's on my old computer at work. At my old job. I don't know. It was a bunch of documents Rowan sent us when we first started. You have it? Oh, you have to jump off. Okay. I'll see if I can find it as well, Kelly. It was among a bunch of documents Rowan sent when we first started, and it was just said something about statute or something, but there were several things that said statute. Oh, you got it?
There's a copy of the statute in the survey writing committee folder on Basecamp.
Oh, I put it there. Or she put it there. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, then, if there's not anything else, we could go ahead and close the meeting for today. Is there any other questions or anything? Okay,
I had a quick question.
Okay.
Just as far as scheduling the next meeting, do you want to do a poll again, or since we're going to be meeting a couple of times a week, do you want to is this a good time on every other Monday, or how do you want to approach that?
I'm okay with it. We would probably have to ask the others, kind of send an email out and ask them, but I'm okay with it.
It works for me. I imagine there's people not here today for whom it doesn't work, but maybe we should check on that.
Okay, yeah, I'll send an email out and we'll figure that out.
Okay, well then, I think this is dismissed. Thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank y'all. Thanks, Dea.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adia.
Thanks. Bye-bye.